here we go. Let's try e4. Heiser was the guy who picked number 70 from the number range. Let's go with the Sicilian. And I've been playing this quite a bit, the Rossolimo. So I'm going to stick with it and maybe gain some more experience, potentially damaging the queenside structure. I'm gonna do that. If I don't do that right away, the black connects knights and then is there to recapture. So with this structural change, what will I look to do next? I'm going to play queen to e2 immediately. It seems a bit, I think this is an exception to the rule of not bringing your queen out early in a chess game. She can't really be harassed from the e2 square, and I'm doing this to facilitate an eventual e5 advance. I may want to also consider a d3. Well, d3 is going to be played. I don't want to play d4 because it helps to undouble. It will undouble the black pawns. My main aim with now this resulting structure will be to show that this bishop is a bad piece. So let me do this first. I don't want to commit just yet with my king. Not that I would really be castling kingside because of this open b file. I think that's simply unnecessary. But I think that there might be an idea, and well, I was thinking if the knight played to g7, e7, g6, there is this idea of h4, h5 to interfere with that idea. Not the case here. So I think this is a good idea. Let's establish this structure. And you know what? If I play my knight to c3 and d4 is played, I can't play to a4 because of queen a4 check. So in other words, when I do play my knight to c3, I want to be able to meet a structural change of d4 with knight a4, where I could put pressure on c5. This may turn out to be my plan, to put pressure on the c5 square. And I could do that with ensuing moves such as knight c3. Let me first get castled, however. Otherwise, again, knight c3, d4, knight a4, queen a5 with check, and my knight would be dead. So now I'm ready to develop my knight, and now I could get there. Hang on for a second, though. I think I push first. Knight here. Yeah, this is an important detail, actually. I'm taking pause right here because there's potential for structural changes, and depending on the pawn structure, that it really dictates the rest of the game. So I want to make sure I end up with a good structure. If I play knight c3, the thing that I've been talking about for a bunch, knight c3, d4, knight a4, and then e5, this bishop, I want to keep him dead, but he would then become alive. So first e5, don't even allow this pawn to move, and that has a direct influence on this guy. Now, hang on, maybe I still don't do this just yet. I think I'm going to transition. Maybe I don't want my knight to be kicked over here on a4. In fact, it could always be challenged with knight b6, and I don't want to capture because it repairs the pawn structure, gives the rook play. So I'm going to transition. I'm going to come over in this direction and support this pawn. If I play knight c3, now I want to be able to meet d4 with knight e4. However, if I do that right away, knight e4 would interference with my defense of the e5 square. So I need to have my bishop and knight here to defend the pawn. Something like this advance might be available at some point. I don't think it's good now, but keep in mind he is unprotected, and so an advance like f5, if I'm to capture, there is queen takes bishop. But again, I don't think that that is a good thing to be running forward with. So let me complete development. I'm now fully developed. Black still needs to move this bishop before they are fully developed as well. And the reason that I'm seeing this advance wouldn't be a good idea, whether it be f6 or f5, is because I'm able to capture and have pressure on the bishop. So my main aim will, I believe, still be to make sure this bishop does not have a good life. Keep this bishop under lock and key. Don't let him get activated. If there's more pressure placed on c4 with bishop a6, I simply play this. And, well, my candidate moves are b3. I'm definitely not considering tying down a piece to the defense of the pawn. So if anything, I'll let my pawns defend my pawns when they're attacked. So b3 I'm considering. I'm also considering h4, h5, h6. Using this guy to soften up the black kingside structure. I don't feel that there's a need to play b3 just yet. I don't like having my queen having to defend a pawn, so let me just do this right away. If my knight is attacked, since he's now unprotected, queen here, rook a to c1 will be the one that I move to defend the knight. Because I'll want this rook around to maybe play to e1 or d1. I'm not sure he really knows where he belongs. And now let me continue with this. I don't know that my rooks have a clear... well, yeah, I don't think that they know where they belong just yet. We don't have really any pawn exchanges, do we? So I didn't play h4 to just sit there. I'm doing this again to try and soften up the black kingside structure. So this guy flinched. And what could I be doing next? Queen here, there's a fork. Let me do this, because eventually I might be threatening to do something like capture, a very timely capture, and then put pressure on this pawn. Now, if there is this structural change, I was talking about playing here, but I might find it better to play to a4, because that would mean that this rook would not get any play on the queen side. I would have, essentially, after d4, knight a4, I would have the queen side on lockdown. And then I could look to play on the king section, king side of the board. Play with this pawn having the space advantage, this pawn on e5. And I guess this knight is looking to reroute on the b4 square. They are going in reverse. Do I really want to commit my g-pawn? Let me see if I can get my opponent to flinch. Maybe that bishop is going to come back. Yes, he is. Okay, I'm going to go just a single step. Maybe I could do king g2, rook up and over. Get my rook right here. Seems like that comes at a snail's pace, but I don't know that my opponent has a successful pawn move that helps their position. Now that move kind of scares me. Let me bump my king up. Keep in mind, I am never considering really capturing. Only with a concrete line would I be considering some capture, because I feel I would just be helping my opponent. So let me do this. Let me get my queen over here. What my opponent might be threatening is rook here, the capture, and then this knight jumping on d3. This is the one square I need to be a little bit cautious of, and, well, I'm winning a pawn here. I guess we're going to have some exchange sacrifice. Yes, okay, so looking to break it open. Maybe I should have never allowed that. You know what? I should have just put my knight there and not even allowed that possibility. Would have been much cleaner. Let me kick this knight out of here. So now there's a material deficit, but I have to babysit my weaknesses over here, my pawns. I'm not so quick to give this guy up. And there's still a problem with this bishop. And this knight. I'm controlling a lot of squares. Let's get on a half-open file. This bishop is now coming to life. Let me continue with this rook up and over to g4. Yeah, again, I think the big thing was that my opponent did not have what? A good pawn break that would help their position. Bishop takes pawn is now threatened, and that is being sniffed out right away. Let's come here. There's no time. I guess the last thing I could do is get my knight involved. There's not going to be any time. Okay, good game. Let's back up. I don't know if I'm going to be able to give any advice here. Let's see. Because I know how difficult it could be once you get into one particular structure. Well, let me point out this. You need to really be familiar with this resulting structure. If you're going to be playing e6 as black in this position, if you're not comfortable with this structure, I would try to do something else. Because it could really turn into a strategic crush. Again, a position where white maintains complete control over the position. And I've experienced it on the black end. I'm speaking from experience. I know what it's like to struggle from this position. I've been squeezed myself. So after queen to e2, I think it's important to consider f6. It's quite weakening, but the idea behind it is to prevent this e5 advance. If you could somehow get in f6, e5, d6, we're in a whole new world, because the bishop can come out much more freely. A very nice diagonal, a very nice post on e6. So I wonder about this f6 advance. You need to be quite familiar with the pawn structure, the different advances that are timely. f6 might be one of them at this very moment. I would look into that. But again, if this isn't something you're comfortable with, I would try to find something other than maybe even e6. I wonder if queen b6 or queen c7. In the event of a capture, you're there to recapture with the queen and keep your structure as is. But then again you're wasting some time. So I could still be giving up the bishop for knight and then playing on the fact that you're behind in development, and I'll be looking to open up the position. So I guess the one thing to be pointing out is I would really be looking into f6. Again, I'm not 100% sure on it, but you have to be very, very careful. We ended up getting into a structure that is, again, favorable for white. I guess there's a lot of instructional value in the form of pawn structures in this particular game. They really dictate the rest of the game. If there's an improvement, again, on my end, I think I wouldn't even have been allowing this type of advance. Maybe I would have committed my knight a bit sooner. Or maybe it was still okay keeping this knight, having some flexibility with this knight in the event of d4, knight e4 stuff. But again, it's a favorable structure for white at this point, and it's, I think, again, dating all the way back to this moment right here. Instead of bishop e7, this pawn advance. Or maybe even a move later after I played d3. Okay. Let me close out of this.